Welcome back, everybody, to the Vintage Sewing Machine Garage YouTube channel. I am in the process of finishing, I believe, fingers crossed, my work on the white brand sewing machine model 568. And I thought I would demonstrate for you how to wind a bobbin on this model. Now, this process or this method will apply to a number of white sewing machines from this era. You may have a machine that sort of looks like this, but maybe it's a different color. It could be, copper, metallic, and beige or something. They had lots of different versions of this machine. And even if you have the original manual, some of the manuals, some of them are better than others. Sometimes you get rough copies, and even if you have the original manual is not here with this machine, but sometimes the manual will give you an instruction, but it doesn't show pictures of everything they're describing. So hopefully this video will be useful to some of you who may be threading the machine for the first time, or maybe you have this machine and haven't touched it in 5 years and you don't remember. In any case, what we're going to do is I've got a spool of white thread here, and I'm going to put that on I guess you could put it on either of the two spool pins, but I'm just going to put it on this one. And then what we're going to do is we're going to thread. Let's get a little close up here. You can see a little bit more closely as exactly what it is that I'm doing. So, oops, a little too much. What you're going to do is you're going to bring the thread around, and you have these little thread guides, the same ones that you might use when you are doing normal sewing. But that's a different video. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to loop up into the, come on, you. I'm doing this in sort of a backwards way, and then I'm going to, there we go. And then I'm going to come over here to the front one, and I'm also going to attach it. And thread guides are, once you've threaded a sewing machine a few times, what you will discover is that most sewing machines, you'll know if the thread doesn't take the first time because it will flop out of the thread guide. The thread guides are, and what I did was I came and put the thread right down in the center of those two pieces of metal there. Let's zoom in a little bit more. Hopefully you can see that. I'll do it again for you. So I'm going to take the thread and just come right between these two pieces. And I have now threaded the upper thread guides. And I'm doing this, sometimes you may think, well, gosh, why do I have to do all of this, all of these different turns just to get the thread onto the bobbin? But thread guides are actually very clever because they are used to basically keep the thread at a certain tension in the right place so it doesn't get all tangled and messed up. And so the only thing we have left to do is, if I angle down, you'll then take your thread that has been threaded up into the those top thread guides. We're going to come straight across, and I'm going to come up here. And this is a yet another. It looks like a thread tension dial, but it's basically a round thread guide, easy to use. And I am going to, whoops, come back here. I am going to then, I've got it here. So then what are we going to do? Well, we got to get our bobbin on, and we have not engaged the bobbin winder yet. I'm simply going to add, let's see if we can turn this, give you a little bit better angle of what I'm doing. So I'm going to put my bobbin, this is a class 15 bobbin, it's a little strange looking compared to most. Now, as is always the case, I want to take my thread and I want to start on the inside of the bobbin, and I'm going to put my thread here, and then I'm going to come through one of the holes in the bobbin. It doesn't really matter, one of the outer holes, so that the key point here is that your thread starts on the inside and goes outward. Okay, don't start on one of the bobbin holes from the outside and go inward. That's not going to work, and it'll just create a big mess, which which would be nice for you not to have to deal with thread jams. Yeah, so I'll do it again with this close-up view for you. I wanted to cut that anyway. Okay, so you've got your thread, and just checking on something. So now I've got my thread again. You want to start in the center, on the inside of the bobbin rim, and find one of those outer holes. And you have quite a few to choose from in many of these bobbins. Now, what I'm going to do here, I haven't actually started the winding process yet. But what I'm going to do is make sure your hands are clean. Keep your and this bobbin tire is actually going to rotate away from you, and the reason for that is that, of course, your hand wheel is going to be moving toward you, and that's going to cause the tire to actually go away from you, if that makes sense. And what I'm doing is I'm just turning it a few turns here, and what I'm trying to accomplish is basically I want to get a couple of sort of a running start with the thread. Okay, so if I zoom back in and you see the thread, I've got a few windings of thread. Now I have my tail. I'm going to go ahead and cut that and get that out of the way so it doesn't. I can trim it a little more later, but I don't want it getting anywhere near the rest of my hopefully wound bobbin. Okay, so the only thing left to do, because of all, remember all the effort that White went to and the effort I went to understand their mechanism, this was a totally analog and yet clever way to basically make bobbin winding a little more convenient, because you no longer had to adjust the clutch knob that many of you are used to adjusting. It's just simply when you lift up on this lever, all of that magic and all of that complexity means that your needle bar should not move. Again, it can sometimes wiggle and hop, but if it's working properly, you should not end up with a big mess. So all that's left now is we're gonna try it. Now I have not installed the needle in the needle bar yet. So, because remember, I'm going to be doing that. That's a separate thing, and I want to do that slowly to make sure there's no problems with the needle clearing. But that's not going to be an issue for us when we're winding bobbins. Okay, so I've got my foot pedal, I've got the machine plugged in for the first time actually since I've been doing this overall project, and I'm going to show you a little more of the bobbin winding. Now what you'll see is, notice here, the wheel is turning, right? But we're not getting very much action on the, there we go. Sometimes when you're trying to wind a bobbin, you're going to need to add a little bit more pressure to your speed pedal, your foot pedal. Now, again, we know that these are designed, so in theory, this bobbin should stop winding before the thread gets beyond the edge of the rim of the bobbin. But you want to watch it. I always watch bobbins when I'm winding them. And obviously you can see the needle bar is not moving. I'm slowing down, and actually if I speed back up again, now what is happening? Why are we getting, it is actually slowing down because you're getting more friction between this sort of metal piece that's sticking out, and the thread is starting to bump up against it, and that's causing it to slow down the winding. However, we have another thing that's happening. So I'm going to release the bobbin lever, take the bobbin off, and I'll show you. The reason you saw me pushing the tire, let me show you what we have. So the bobbin is, the winder stopped. See if I can get this on a good spot. The winder stopped before the thread started to go right, just almost right up to the edge, right? It's actually fuller in the center of the bobbin. Now, I don't know if you can see, but I could tell that, remember, I used a lot of extra oil to wake up my drive shaft here, and I don't know if you can tell, but the tire is now shiny. What does that mean? It simply means that the oil that I placed, of course I put oil in this oiling port, but I also put some here, and then I put some over here on the side. And what that means is, and you can see me mopping it up here with the cotton swab, I have some excess oil, which actually is making a nice little cleaner here. So this can happen, and again, I wanted to make sure that this shaft was going to spin properly, and it does. So again, you can consider whether you want to take, by putting, again, this is normally the only place you put a drop of sewing oil, and this only happens, oh gosh, once every 6 months, or depends on how often you're sewing. And then I actually put some here, but I also ended up putting some right there where the rim of the bobbin tire, see a little bit better there, meets this shaft. And there's simply more oil than it can hold. And very often I don't have this problem, but I ended up with a little bit more oil. If that happens to you, do not panic. There's an easy solution. You can take this off. I don't like the effect that 99% alcohol has on the rubber compound. So what am I going to do? I'm going to hold my lever here, take the tire off, and you can see it's got some sewing oil. What I will do is I'll just take some dishwashing liquid and water and rinse off the oil and dry it. I'll bring the tire back, and then of course I'll come back on my hand wheel that you saw me in an earlier video, take the alcohol and come around and make sure I remove it. This is something you normally do not face when your machine is up and running. But again, I sometimes add more sewing oil than you typically would, because I want to ensure that something that has not spun in 2 decades can spin once again without having too much effort. So yes, occasionally maybe I can even take another cotton swab, and as I turn it, you can see some of that oil. If this happens to you, again, it's not a tragedy or anything. Eventually, this oil is going to work itself out, and you're not going to have to oil that for a while. Okay, so what I would suggest is try oiling in this spot here first. If it works, in this hole right here, if you put 1 or 2 drops of oil here, which is the normal oiling spot for your bobbin winding shaft, right there, if that's good enough, then that's fine. Start there, and then if it's giving you a hard time, you can try adding a drop here. Only in severe cases do you want to add an oil where I did, and you can see that as it starts to spin, the oil gets pulled out and onto the tire. It's again, the machine hasn't been harmed. We haven't broken anything. This is one of those situations where you can sometimes make a mess like I just did. So this is a good time to share with you. If that happens to you, don't panic. You haven't harmed it. You just got a little extra oil. And it's, again, cotton swabs are your friends. They're like little mops. And I have done this before on other machines. And sometimes I'm just having to guess, how much oil am I going to need? But the good news is, winding a bobbin on these machines, it truly is. Basically, you raise the lever, you wind the bobbin, you lower the lever. Again, this was I think it's pretty impressive engineering accomplishment when you consider that they had to do it mechanically. There was nothing electronic making any magic there. This was conceived of and thought of after decades and decades of machines being made with the traditional clutch knob. Now, most of you have traditional clutch knobs, and they're great. They're strong. They're hard. There's nothing wrong with them. So it's not like you're missing out. But again, the sewing machine business was very competitive, and the White company said, well, let's do something different. Let's innovate. Sometimes doing something different doesn't work out well, but in this case, I don't know. Tell me what you think down in the comments. I think it's a pretty impressive mechanism. far more impressive than the amount of oil I chose to use to loosen this. But it's spinning beautifully. So in the future owner just needs to add that one drop and they're fine. And that's how the machine was originally created. But sometimes machines that sit for decades and that are fast asleep, I have to take extra measures to wake them up. But anyway, I hope that was helpful. That is how you wind a bobbin on the White sewing machine brands model 568. This again will apply to the 565 and a number of other White sewing machines from this era. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you next time.